Folks, welcome to this edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live show for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. And folks, these conversations are live. We are coming to you live at actually 1 o'clock on the Eastern time zone here, an hour later than normal. But always excited to welcome my guest, and this week is no exception. I'm joined today by Mr. Matt Grabiel. He is a seasoned pre-sales professional and pre-sales leader. He has worked in the commercial, what we often call the SMB market. He's done enterprise B2B sales. He's worked Fed and SLED and government and everything in between. And we're going to talk about the different skills, the different challenges facing pre-sales professionals in the different markets, and then wherever else the conversation happens to take us. Matt, welcome, my friend. Thank you for being here, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, fabulous. Likewise. And you and I think, first connected, a couple of years ago, and then I think we hadn't chatted for a little while, and you changed jobs, and the next thing I know, I think you and I reconnected. I was like, man, I got to get you on the show. Like, this conversation is too good for others not to hear.
Yeah, I think we met pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And then we had talked about trying to get you in and get a session or two going at a sales kickoff, and then COVID hit and we couldn't do it. So.
Indeed.
So good to reconnect with you.
Indeed. Likewise. Well, thanks for being here. So, Matt, and I love asking people how they got into pre-sales because the journey is different for all of us. So do you mind just taking a minute and sharing a little bit about how you got into pre-sales, and then just a little bit of your background and some of the stops that you've had on your journey?
Sure. So I didn't go the traditional route of, going to college right out of high school. I ended up joining the Navy, and my dad said rent's due at the first of the month, and I said I'll show you. So I joined the Navy. Great experience for me, probably best path for me at that time. And I got into technical field, aviation electronics. So I was doing a lot of tech, and there was a lot of surprisingly. Back then, there was a lot of computers. I won't tell you which version of Windows it was, but started with a 3. And got into the tech side of things, building networks. Got out of the Navy, decided that wasn't what I wanted to do for my career, and went to work for, surprisingly enough, my stepdad, who owned an AS400 medical billing software company. That's a lot to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went out and learned Novell NetWare and a little bit of NT, and then after a while ended up that was in New York. Moved to Houston. Moved in with some buddies, and just still pretty young and just figuring out what I wanted to do, and needed a job. So I got a job in IT, working afternoons, working evenings. Got hired on full time as an administrator. And then one day, I was the only person that knew the AS400 at the company at the time. And the sales team came in and started talking to them about some products. And the sales guy took me out and he said, "Man, you might be a good sales engineer." I'm like, "What the heck is that?" He's like, "It's basically what you tell people what you do." And I'm like, "Okay, but you do it for a software." I was like, "Okay." Fast forward about 6 months, right around 2000, right after Y2K, and I'm a sales engineer. And so no idea what I was doing. Kept getting patted on the back, like, "You're doing a great job. Go sell another one." And then so was there. That was a little company called PentaSafe, then became NetIQ, which I think now is part of Micro Focus, with a lot of other folks. So anyway, great job, great time. I really enjoyed it. I was traveling the world. I was doing, having great time. Ended up not traveling for a few weeks and met a lady who eventually became my wife.
There you go.
So, and fast forward, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the security side of things. got a phone call from a recruiter after being at Pensafe/NetIQ for about 8 years, and which I thought this is going to be my job for the rest of my life. I mean, that was the mentality back then for me, was like, let's go. Got a recruiter phone call from a company called VMware. I'm like, what do they do?
I've never heard of them, right?
Never heard of them, yeah. And so, they showed me some things, and I went, wow, that's really cool. And then they made me an offer, and I became an SE there, an enterprise SE there. Whereas kind of at the NetIQ level, I was more of an overlay and a specialist, kind of SMB, hey, whoever we can talk to. We were small enough, and then it became more of a specialist role. And the reason I took the VMware job is my wife called me. I was in Malaysia, and I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I was going to bed, and my phone rang, my BlackBerry rang, and she said, we're pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay. Was I home? So much. So that was the attraction to leave there and go to VMware, which was obviously a great choice for me. I was there for almost 8 years. We got the fortunate enough to be promoted into leadership. It was a tough interview process. There were a lot of us. Sometimes I wonder if the best candidate won. So I looked at, but it was a great experience. Great mentors there, both in sales. I got to do a lot of really interesting jobs. I got to act as the regional sales leader for a little while. When Iris wasn't there, our VP came over and said, I need you to run the team while nobody's doing it.
Wow.
Okay.
What a great experience that must have been.
Yeah, it really was. Got to do it twice.
Oh boy.
So, it was one of those. It was one of those things like roofing a house. You can do it. You'd rather have somebody else do it. It was just it wasn't for me. The sales,
totally get it.
The sales leader part. The SE leader part I really enjoyed. And then careers change, things happen, and so I wanted to give another an opportunity. Really wanted to stay at VMware, and I got into enablement, and specifically sales and SE enablement. And that really opened my eyes to kind of the back end processes and how things work. And it's like, oh, it is all about the sale, but it's not all about the sale. There's a lot more to running a company. So that was really interesting. And I really learned there a lot of differences between how people consume information. And so that really opened my eyes to a lot of how people learn and like to learn. Then got a phone call from one of my mentors, a guy by the name of Jeff Margulies, and said, hey, we got an opportunity over here at Service.
By the way, that gentleman has thrown you a little bit of love already. So Jeff, thank you for chiming in. Has also Wayne Wilson has chimed in and said hello. By the way, we don't see you out there, folks. So if you do care to say hello, or if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in. So anyway, carry on.
All right, real quick shout out to Wayne. Wayne had the best marketing slogans. I probably can't use them in this podcast. The best marketing slogans ever when we were at Pensafe. Stuff that you really put on shirts, he did. So
love it.
So anyway, still have a few of those, Wayne. But anyway, so went over to ServiceNow, ran enablement, and then for SEs. So ServiceNow is just for SEs enablement, and that was, looking back on that, was really cool because I really got to work with the sales enablement team and partner with them and take content that they were using or give them content, but we were autonomous from them. And so that was cool because we really got to focus on how SEs get to learn. And
yeah, love that.
I think there was a couple of hundred SEs, which was a big org. And I remember the day I left that organization, I was up on stage at sales kickoff, and there were 777 SEs.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's a lot. And so from there, I went into customer success, trying to find my place. I really kept coming back to sales engineering now. Like it's near and dear to my heart. And so customer success is also very important. It's just not as near and dear to my heart sometimes as selling. So, and then did the customer success thing for a little while. Got a call from another friend of mine who you know, Chris, named Matt Willard, over at a little company called Centrify. We did, Matt said, America's is yours, go for it. And so he's like, I got to deal with the rest of the world. And we merged with another company, and I really learned a lot about the different segments and how different companies run different segments. So different philosophies. So that was really interesting. And then most recently at Okta. So at Okta, I was running the commercial business for the East and Central, which scale-wise is huge. Doesn't sound very big, but at one time it was close to 100 SEs, about 60 not too long ago. And but I mean, we were doing, we were doing a lot of transactions. Let's just say that, crazy transactions. So
yeah, that's awesome. By the way, Chris Hickey has said hello, chimed in and says hello from Chicago. Chris, nice to see you. And by the way, Jeff said we're up to 2,300 SEs now. So that is a massive organization. Thanks for chiming in, folks. I do want to drill in on a couple of things, but before I go there, you mentioned that when you got into sales enablement, one of the things you learned is the different ways in which people learn or communicate. Do you mind just picking that apart just for a moment, Matt?
Sure. You have people who are verbose. I'm one of them.
Yep. We tend to be as sales engineers. We tend to be. Yep.
Right. There are people, and that's how they communicate, but they don't necessarily receive that way. I would rather watch something than to read about it. So, but there are people who are different. I don't understand them always, but they are different. They would rather read a manual or read something and go, okay, now I know it. So I would rather watch somebody do it. And there are people like my son who I can tell him, he doesn't listen. He can read it, doesn't listen. He has to go in and physically do it to figure it out.
Do it. Yeah.
And so one of the things that I learned with that team and enablement was to kind of do all three different things: read it, see it, do it. And that kind of got the gamut. Some people would skip the do it. Some people would go, some people would skip something. Some people were scared to try it. And so those were the three different ways that we would try to focus on. Yeah.
Well, the reason that I was inspired to double click on that is that I think as sales professionals, the prospects and customers that we're working with, they tend to, quote, learn or make decisions in different ways in a very similar manner, right? Some people need to see it to believe it. Some people need to hear it, right? Some people need to read it, right? Some people need to experience it for themselves. So I think keeping that in mind, now look, everybody, they collect information, they gather information, they interpret information in different manners, right? So we have to be in tune to the people that we're dealing with, whether we're in enablement or a sales professional. So love the fact that you mentioned that. Let's talk a little bit more about this idea of different market segments. So your last role, you were running a team of that was selling to commercial and SMB. What were some of the unique challenges that you and your team face in selling to that market?
So in that market, and that's a large span, right? So it's anybody from 50 employees up to, I think the cutoff was like 1,200 or 1,250. Okay. Yep. But if you think about the customers that are in there, we always joke like Joe's Bait Shop or Matt's Muffler Shop, right? Maybe a small or a medium-sized organization that's not a very technical organization, and then you have something smaller, like some of these AI companies, right? These AI companies are small entities, and you very technical, and a lot of times you are dealing with the C-level person, the person that an enterprise or strategic or majors, whatever you call them, that you're trying to get to, you're dealing with them. It may not be for as much money. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And they don't have as many hoops to go through to buy. So when you're dealing with the CISO or senior VP of all of it, they just say, yeah, how much is it? We're going to buy through a partner. How are we going to do it? This is how we buy things. Here we go. Let's get the deal done. And so the speed on that is so much faster. The volume is more as well, because you may have and I'm making up numbers here, you may have a $15,000, $20,000 deal, and then you may have a $2 million deal, and you go from one to the other. And what I've found, this is my experience, in enterprise or strategic accounts, even if you're selling a $10,000 deal, there's still a procurement process to go through. There's still all these other things to go through. They still have their processes, because of who they are, how they operate, how they've operated. And so those, sometimes a $20,000 deal at, mega company takes twice as long as it does anywhere else. And so the volume
no doubt
is a lot bigger.
No doubt. So I was going to ask a question, but before I do, Chris Hickey actually just floated a good question that I think is worth touching on. Chris, thanks for the question. How much overlap in sales skills do you like to see between AEs and SEs? Now, I have an opinion, but Matt, you're my guest, so you get first crack at this.
I like them to be able to have each other's backs. But I don't like them stepping on each other. So I've seen AEs that really think that they know the product, or they know a feature or function in the product, and they think that's what's going to sell it. Like, oh, show them that thing. And you're like, they're not even interested in that. Right. But then I have seen sales engineers who will get with I don't say a weak salesperson, but maybe a salesperson who's not as seasoned or is not as rounded. And they try to do more selling. And sometimes the salesperson's going, just shut up, answer the question, and move to the next piece. So I like them blended. I like SEs who can go technical, and if it gets out of the realm, can go get help from somewhere else. But I like them to be aware of when to just be quiet, or when to ask more questions, when to do more discovery.
Yeah. Amen. And I like that. What one of the things that comes to mind, and by the way, Chris said, I have an opinion. Chris, I'm sorry, we can't turn your mic on. Otherwise, I'd invite you to share your opinion. First of all, I do think, look, there's a reason we're called sales engineer, right? And I like to say big S, little e, and it's different in all organizations. But we do, as a sales engineer, we do have to have sales skills, right? To include listening skills, to include negotiation skills, to include presentation skills, etc. I think we need to know our lane. It doesn't mean we need to always stay in our lane, but we need to know our lane, and so that when we are stepping out of our lane a little bit, we can step back into our lane, right? Look, there are times when I'm, as a sales engineer, I might need to do a little bit more of the selling. And as an account executive, there are times when you may need to answer a technical question, or at least a question about the product, right? But we need to understand where those lines are. So Chris Hickey, thank you for the question. And by the way, we had somebody dial, Cindy from Nigeria. We're covering the globe here, Matt. Right. So Cindy, nice to hear from you. Got a question from Wayne. Do you find that SMB versus enterprise enter the sales process at different stage of the decision process? Good question, Wayne. I was going to ask something similar. What do you think, Matt?
I think it's less about the segment and it's more about the sales team.
Yeah.
So typically, and I know this is a generalization, the enterprise and the strat reps, the coverage is usually one SE to one sales rep, or one SE to maybe 3 or 4. So the SE can enter the sales stage a little bit sooner. And the sales stage they tend to work together a little bit more. The SE and the rep can coach each other. I like to see that as well, not just one way, but coach each other. And they might be able to do a little bit more discovery. The SE might have a little bit more leeway as when they come in. In the SMB space, typically it's 4 to 6 sales reps that an SE is supporting. They don't have time. They are booked. I mean, anytime I would go look at somebody's calendars, I always knew when we were going to have a good quarter, regardless where I worked. I could go look at SE calendars at about month 1, month 2, and go, yeah, we're going to be fine. There's plenty of, we're getting plenty of demos, we're getting plenty of opportunities. And then, but if they start getting involved earlier, it was usually to coach the sales rep, a newer sales rep, on how to do discovery, what to ask, get them up to speed on, okay, here's some basic questions and you can answer for a customer. Here's the top 10 questions we get. Here's the answers to those. So you can maybe, do a little bit more discovery before you just throw an SE at. So Wade, to answer your question, I do see a little bit of a difference. I do see a little bit of a difference in when the commercial SMB gets involved a little bit later in the process, and hopefully the deal's a little bit more qualified.
Yeah, indeed. Well, and that was Dennis Andrews made a comment. He said it depends on the discovery process. I think maybe he was, responding to one of the other things. But let's talk about, because this is something that I've had the opportunity to work with plenty of folks that sell to the enterprise upmarket space, but I've also worked with quite a few folks who have been in the commercial B2B, SMB space. And one of their big, in fact, they take me to task a little bit because they know how much I talk about discovery. And they're like, Chris, we don't have the opportunity in most cases to do a separate discovery conversation before we have to get in there and present something, demonstrate something, et cetera. How did you advise your folks or coach your folks in those scenarios?
Not always successfully, I'll say that. I didn't always coach them to a successful outcome. But what I learned over time is that the SEs and the AEs that would take a few minutes prior to a call, not immediately before a call, but maybe the day before, maybe a couple hours before, and run through and say, this is what I talked about with a customer. This is what we did, because nobody ever puts notes in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using, right?
Come on, really?
Yeah. But here are my notes, right? Here are my notes and what we did, and here's who we're talking to, and here's what I did, and here's what I asked them. And the SE gets to go, well, what about this? Did you talk about this? Did you get that? Maybe they didn't take notes on it. Maybe they did. And the SE, this is hard to do, but if you can empower the SE, not to say no, but to say, hey, man, next time we do this, let's get a little bit more information. It'll make it easier, right? Sometimes you have to say no, but that's been my experience, is that, and then sometimes the SE just says, whatever, I'll just go do it. I'll just do this, which is okay as well, and hopefully the AE learns from it. And the teams that can do that are usually successful. Even in the worst economy, those teams are really, really good. So
well said. And by the way, Chris Hickey chimed in the pre-call plan. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it sounds, honestly, sometimes it feels almost like remedial sales 101 to say, well, let's get on a call as an AE and an SE. Let's get on a call before the meeting with the customer to make sure we're on the same page and just align on expectations, align on what we know, align on the objective of the meeting, et cetera. But honestly, Matt, I'm still shocked at how little that seems to happen. And and I do think we make the mistake of making assumptions, right? Particularly, look, I'm an SE, I've been doing this for 10 years, I'll just get on and do my thing. But, it doesn't always work that way. So I do think a big part of it is just getting on the same page with your sales counterpart. Right?
Yeah. I told a team one time, I don't care if you guys are lying to me. I just want the same answer out of your mouth as the sales rep's mouth, because at least I know you're talking. At least I know you're talking. So, because if you're talking, you're probably going to figure it out. So
yeah, that's good. There's another thing that you mentioned. And by the way, folks, Matt, let me just press pause here. I'm speaking with Matt Grabiel. He's a seasoned pre-sales professional, seasoned pre-sales leader. We're talking about some of the differences and challenges selling both, quote, what some people say up market and down market, SMB versus enterprise, et cetera. One of the things, demo ready aim. Well said, Chris. Keep them coming. In fact, I ran a workshop. I was telling you, Matt, I ran a workshop this morning. Somebody in my workshop literally said that very thing this morning in the workshop. One of the things that you mentioned in the SMB space is that you, and I've heard this from others, is that we have the opportunity to present to C-level. In many cases, you might be presenting to the CEO, the COO, right? The head of all, maybe CRO or the head of sales. They might not even call it CRO. And you mentioned that usually they can make decisions more quickly. There are fewer hoops to go through. As a result, do you think that puts a little bit more pressure on each meeting, or a little bit more pressure on the demo itself?
I think it does in different ways. I think sometimes people get the title shock, like, oh, I'm presenting to the CISO. I'm going to show them every single technical feature that's in there, right? People have written books about not doing that, right? So
exactly.
But also there's that. Yeah, I think it puts a little bit of it's a different pressure, right? Because I can take that same SE and put her in front of a big company and go, hey, I need you to go present it, at Pepsi. And they go, but it's Pepsi. I'm like, yeah, but it's like IT, it's the IT team, who cares? And so sometimes I think the name and the titles get people a little confused. Interesting point in that I will say, generally, again, a generalism, the AEs that are in enterprise and strat are more seasoned. The account reps, the most recent set of account reps that I worked with, I think we did a kind of a survey that 80% of the account reps that we were supporting had never done an on-site meeting.
Wow.
Because of COVID. They were hired out of college as SDRs, inside sales reps, right? They had gotten promoted to the field in SMB or commercial, and companies for 2 years weren't seeing people. And then they didn't know how to do that. And so I had SEs as well, newer in career, had never done an on-site meeting. So that was a different level of intimidation for them. So it's a different problem than I think it was 5-6 years ago. As far as who they're presenting to now, I have to go in person. Well, how do I do that? What do I connect back to? How do I, do I dial in? So it's a different problem.
Well, and we're not going to be able to, so certainly not going to solve this problem, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. And I've heard this from more than one organization, that they tend to put their less senior people, less experienced people in the SMB space for a variety of reasons, which I understand. And I don't know that that's always the best decision. And I know some SEs, they consider selling to the SMB, quote, down market. They consider that to be a job that should be reserved for the less experienced SE. I disagree. I think some of the most seasoned professionals I know specifically work in the commercial SMB space. Why? Because they're talking to leaders, because it's high pace, because they have to be that much more efficient and that much more effective with less time, because they're just doing more things. How do you respond to that, Matt?
Yeah, so I have also at points in my career had that same mentality. And when I was interviewing for a SE leadership position, I called a very senior SE who happened to be in the commercial space and said, what are you doing? Like, why are you in? Dude, you're an enterprise guy. I've seen you at Walmart. I've seen you at, big companies. And he said, man, this is more fun. He said, it's easier to get deals done. He said, we do more deals. They may not be as big. We're not doing $10 million deals, but we get the occasional $1 million deal. And, he goes, quotas are good. I get to learn products real fast and real quick. And he goes, man, my demo skills are better than they've ever been. He said, he goes, I also, at 5:00, I turn it off.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm not worried about that big proposal next week that we're spending all night working on and my reps calling me and everything else. He's like, I'm 8 to 5. So I'll work, big deal. I'll work or more, I work on stuff. So it's easier. It's a different pace.
Yeah. Yeah.
We also took, we would get enterprise folks that wanted to practice their demos, and they would come down to SMB, and we're like, sure, we'll put you on a $5,000 demo, because if you screw it up, we're not that worried about it. And then provide a lot of feedback to people. It's different. I don't know that it's harder. I don't know that it's better. It's different. I feel that some of those folks that don't go on become architects in enterprise are probably more towards the center of being, technical and sales, or probably more towards the center. And I think the SMB in the commercial space allows people to flex their tech muscle without becoming an architect and learn the sales as well. So it's just a different, it's a different personality.
It's a different game. By the way, a few comments. Chris Hickey mentioned SMB can be super exciting. Jeff brings up a really good point. It's all about the cost of sale at the end of the game. And yes, seasoned SEs very likely cost more. So thanks for those comments. David Packer actually asked a question a few minutes ago. David, sorry, it took me a minute to get to your question. Partners are key to achieve scale in the SMB. How much time do you direct SE teams to spend with channel partners, both enablement and go to market? David, thank you for the question. Really good one. What do you have to say to that question?
It's so this is a loaded question. Thank you, David. That's a good one. Thanks for bringing up the partner, man. Partners are tough, right? If your organization does not support partners, and they may, we got a new partner program, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But if the CRO and the sales folks don't support partner and they don't see value in it, it's really hard to have a good partner strategy, to have an effective partner strategy. I personally like partner SEs, people I'm in charge of the partner. I'm sure they're making it enabled. I want to make sure things are good. But I really like it when the local team is involved with the partner that's near them or in their deal.
Absolutely.
So if it's a big enterprise deal and you're using a big partner, or a big strategic firm, then building that relationship's important. Having the local partner and going out to lunch with them, or being able to drop into their office and hey, what's going on? Invite you to an event, whatever it may be. They invite you. I think just having those relationships is very, very important, and that enablement happens almost naturally. You're like, hey, we're doing a session on these things. You guys want to know more about this? Or they bring you problems, and you go, hey, let me go get you some help on that. So I think just those relationships are key to an effective partner strategy and program. So David, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And I'll just build on that a little bit. I mean, look, particularly in the SMB, I think because they're the ones that partners tend to have the longer term relationships with a lot of these clients, right? And in fact, I'll make a plug. I actually had a conversation with a gentleman named Joe Kester on this very show earlier this year. He works for KPMG and he runs their ServiceNow practice for KPMG, and we did a LinkedIn live talk just like this from the partner perspective in dealing with the software vendor. So for any of you who are interested in double clicking on that a little further, dig up that conversation with Joe. Wayne, you've actually asked a couple questions. I'm going to go in reverse order here. Self-interest. What product marketing actions do you find make the most positive difference for the SE team? Now, I have a very strong opinion on this, But again, Matt, you're my guest. So do you have an opinion on Wayne's question?
I think it goes back to that communication, Wayne. And so knowing Wayne personally, it's been years since I've seen him, but knowing Wayne personally, we had a very good relationship. And that was, and I was just an SE and Wayne was a marketing guy, and he'd walk over and go, "What do you guys think about this? We're going to try this." And, so I think that feedback loop between, I know there's a lot of inbound, outbound product and all the different types of marketing, and I apologize, I kind of lump them together sometimes. But I think that input from the SE team, because the SE see that daily, what the customer wants, what they need. I think just occasionally running an idea by them or getting their buy-in on some things, or just opinions on things, I think that just makes it better. Number one, it makes the SEs feel more involved and like they have a say. But it also, they get the feeling of we're telling you what the customers are saying, and from a day-to-day perspective. And so I think those types of things are most impactful, not just to the SE org, but to the company itself and the messages that go out.
Yeah, well, and as SEs, we are literally out in the field on the front line, right? And we are, not only are we hearing what customers want, but we're hearing what customers don't like or don't want. We're the ones who have to field the answers or the questions rather that we can't answer, right? To me, that feedback's got to go straight to product. Now, in reverse, my answer to Wayne, what product marketing actions do you find the most positive for SEs? Competitive intelligence is my answer. That was the one thing as a very busy SE out in the field, I tried to stay somewhat current in what competitors were doing. It was impossible for me to stay current. So the more we can get competitive intelligence from product marketing, I think the more well-equipped we are in the field. Do you agree with that sentiment, Matt?
Yes, I do. And I don't know if anybody on here is from Microsoft, has worked at Microsoft, but my entire career feels like I have been fighting Microsoft. So anytime you can give me the most recent of how I can trip up the Microsoft rep on their their E5 agreement, let me know. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. That competitive intelligence is really, really important.
Well, and it's just hard for us to stay current, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, folks, I'm speaking with Matt Grabiel. He is a seasoned SE veteran from the IC and leadership perspective. We're talking about selling to various markets, whether it's the SMB, the commercial SMB, as a number of organizations call them, upmarket, enterprise, Fed, SLED. I think, Matt, you did a little bit of work in the government. Wayne actually asked a question a moment ago. Do you find yourself deliberately influencing the C-suite via trusted internal advisors rather than directly for the largest enterprises? Good question. I think at the end of the day, how do you and your teams position yourselves or try to position yourselves as trusted advisors?
So it's about the relationships, right? Sometimes getting the relationship, the higher level, you can. It is hard trying to get a younger in career SE to say, "Hey man," or "Hey lady, your paycheck is the same or similar as some of these directors at some of these companies, because you're at the end of the year, your W-2 is about there. So take that off the table. They are not higher paid. They might have a bigger title than you, but you have, don't worry about they're more senior than you or anything else. They are looking to you for information. They are looking to you to be not only an expert in your product, maybe not the expert, but an expert, no more than them, but also what's the industry doing, right? What is the rest of, okay, in security, what's the biggest, newest thing in relation to identity? Or what's the biggest, newest thing in getting work done faster? What is that? What are the trends? What do we need to know about? What are my competitors or my cohorts doing? And so I think that is a great way that is a great way in the commercial and SMB space for, in really any space, but for an SE to get to that decision maker level and have those conversations with them. But it always starts at the tech level, right? And you've got to win their trust. Hey, this person knows what they're talking about. They're not coming in here and talking about, agile development or whatever it is. They're not coming in here and talking about the new development process and they've never done it. And you've got to prove yourself with them and teach them how to sell up in their own company, provide the value. Their leadership will see that and go, hey, we need to talk to Chris, all right? And Chris has done this and he's coaching our team and he's talking to us and he really knows what he's talking about. He brings value. We need to lead them on this. So in a long-winded way, I think it starts at the IT or I keep saying IT, but it starts at the technical level and you build yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah, and could not agree more. I mean, and you use this word, value. It's all about the value that we bring, right? And I think, Matt, you've heard me say my golden rule of selling technology. He or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel. They want a hole. Yeah. But they don't just want a hole. They want a fence or tree. But they don't just want a fence or tree. They want privacy or shade or fruit or flowers, right? Don't show up and talk about the shiny shovel because that's right. That's only going to get you so far. And by the way, and you've probably heard this, Matt, they say that you're going to be sent to talk to the people that you most sound like. So if you sound like a technician, you're going to be down talking, and I say that with all due respect, you're going to be, quote, down talking, and it's not going to be a business conversation, right? And all deals happen at a business conversation level. Jeff has thrown us a little bit of a curveball question, which I absolutely love. Jeff, thank you for asking. Any thoughts on how Gen AI will change the face of selling for SEs? Great question. It's on everyone's mind. I do have a few thoughts, but Matt, I'll look to
Chris,
you first.
I'd like for you to go first. You've not got to experience the.
You're going to defer to me on this one.
Yes.
Well done. I think you have a future as an account executive. That's just my hunch.
Not on my SE. Yeah.
So I've actually given this a fair amount of thought, and a couple of things come immediately to mind. We are expected to be experts. When we enter a meeting, experts on our product, experts in our industry, but we need to do our homework and make sure we understand the people, the organizations, the roles, the industries of the individuals that we're talking to. We no longer have an excuse for not at least having some insight, because I can go to GPT right now and ask for a 200-word summary of any company and get that instantly. I can go into Chat GPT right now and say, give me the top 5 issues that a CISO in manufacturing is concerned about. And I get that instantly, right? So to me, we should, at the very least, we should be using Chat GPT to instantly familiarize ourselves with the companies that we're presenting to or meeting with, the industry that they're in, and the specific roles of the individuals we're talking to, and what challenges they are facing. So first and foremost, it starts there. Second, we can use Chat GPT to generate so much valuable data. For example, let's say we just need to load some data into a development environment or a demo environment. Go to Chat GPT and instantly do it. Maybe we want to take an article and sort of rewrite it. So Jeff, to answer your question, I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface on what's possible. And I myself, I'll give you I'll just share one more example. So Matt, I think you're familiar with the book I wrote, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. I'm currently working on a certification program, and I'm working on creating an exam for that certification. I literally can cut a half a chapter or copy a half a chapter out of the book, send it to Chat GPT, and ask it to generate a list of 20 questions that tests knowledge and understanding of that text. Boom, there you go. It's by the way, they're pretty darn good questions. So I think the sky's the limit. I'll pause there. I sort of went off on a little bit of a tangent. So
No,
Jeff, I hope that at least triggers some thoughts for you, sir.
I think to pile onto that, Chris, I think AI will be I think in the next few years, and maybe it'll be sooner than then. I think it'll be good. I want to think of it almost like it is a calculator, that there's still a human in charge, right? But it helps us get higher up the food chain in our process, or farther along in our process. You imagine trying to send somebody to Mars by doing math on paper with a pen and a paper, whereas a calculator and then a computer and different models, supercomputers, right? I think AI can help us in the sales process or an SE process, similar to what tools like Consensus has done, where we can have a video and you can choose your own adventure and not plugging any one tool over another, but that's just one I'm familiar with. And I think using AI with a tool like that to have a customer, customers are already doing their own research. They're already looking at things. They know what the top competitors are, or they can at least figure out who to go talk to. And I think tools like ChatGPT or other AI tools can feed other things, because the customer still needs to make a decision. And I think the customer, most of the time, is still on a big decision, is still going to want to talk to a human.
Without a doubt. Here's the analogy that I've used a couple times. I suspect that when the tool industry created the nail gun, there were some carpenters that were scared that they would be made obsolete, because now, just because they were brilliant at using a hammer, that they were no longer, like, anybody was just going to be able to pick up a nail gun now and build a house. Well, guess what? It just made the skilled carpenters that much more effective and that much more efficient. But just because you could pick up a nail gun doesn't mean you could build a house, right? So I think this is a tool that we are going to have to learn to be that much more effective and that much more efficient. So, and Jeff responded. Well said, Jeff. I'll have to get you the Cliff Notes version. And yes, I do think it's going to put more pressure. There was another comment here from a LinkedIn user, and folks, we don't see your name, so I don't know who that was. But your final sentence there, I was inspired to double click on. You always need to know who it is you're talking to and what's important to them. Amen. Whoever said that. At the end of the day, it is all about our customer. It's about them, their objectives, their challenges, what they're trying to achieve. Love that. Matt, if you can believe it, we've been at this for 50 minutes already. I know time flies when you're having fun, and we've had so many great comments. Jason Zekowitz chimes in as well. Yes, indeed. Very well said, Jason. Very, very well said.
That was my account years ago.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Blockbuster.
I told them, Jeff might have been with me. I asked them, what are you guys doing about Redbox? And they're like, those guys won't be around. I'm like, well, what about this Netflix thing? And they're like, we're fine.
We're bad.
Yeah.
That is hysterical. That's when you wish it was a Zoom call and you had it recorded so that you could pull it back. Right? Yeah. See, I told them. Yeah. I told them what was coming. Yeah. Matt, you've been so gracious with your time, and I really appreciate it. I do want to wrap things up here in just a few minutes, but anything that maybe you thought we might touch on, but we haven't, in terms of just understanding the SMB market, the velocity at which we move, maybe some of the unique skill sets, that anything that we haven't touched on.
So I think we all love the SEs in the world. We love the job of being an SE, but let's face it, we do this job for money.
Amen.
And we haven't talked about the money in SMB. And Jeff brought this up. Usually it's a lower cost resource SE. It's a newer in career SE, right? But percentage of attainment in SMB and commercial is usually Not always, because there's always the, hey, I just closed a $20 million deal, or the Fed guy, the Fed lady that closes the Air Force deal. It's, the biggest deal in company history. But consistently, I would argue that commercial and SMB, those SEs hit their number more consistently, and the paychecks are more consistent. Whereas, the higher up in the food chain on accounts you go, you do this, you feast and famine, and those folks are a lot more steady. I've had SEs come and say, hey, we don't have a lot of deals going on. Can I go pick up some deals in commercial? You need any help?
Interesting.
So I would argue that as well.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. There was one other question that I was going to ask from a management perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So as an SE manager, how has managing an SMB team been different for you than managing an enterprise team or like a SLED Fed team?
And I would separate SLED and Fed, because I've had great Fed's usually been there, done that. Enterprise has usually been there, done that. And poke at all the Fed folks. They're special, and they'll tell you, right? Oh, we're different in Fed. Well, we're selling the same product, guys. But SLED, I would account more towards like the higher end of commercial. But managing those folks, there's different challenges. One is they're newer in career, right? Typically, SMB and commercial are typically newer in career, and sometimes you have to say, show up on time, right? Show up on time and look presentable, right? And then, but if you tell them to log it in Salesforce, or you tell them to log it in whatever, they do it, right? And you tell them why it's important. Do this, do this, do this. And it's just part of who they are. Whereas enterprise and strat or majors, and they're kind of like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. Like, you can come in here and tell me what we're going to do, and we're not going to do it. And so change sometimes is harder in the enterprise if you want to go a different direction. Real quick example, I know we're getting short on time. We went from every deal being a new deal to, oh, shoot, people aren't buying right now. And we go back and focus on customer care, not necessarily customer success, but like, hey, how you doing? What's going on?
Right.
Enterprise kind of struggled with that. SMB and commercial said, okay, well, we're not doing demos for new products. Let's go, or to new customers. Let's go talk to our customers that we sold to and show them some other stuff, or talk to them, what's going on? How are you doing? They weren't big enough to have a customer success team or whatever. So it was easier to pivot them than it was for some of my peers in enterprise and strategic. Even though they're doing account management, they're like, well, that's the customer success person's job. So a little bit easier to get them to shift directly if you need them to.
Interesting. Yeah. And what I hear you saying to a certain degree is maybe a slightly more open mindset in terms of just doing different things, a little bit more dynamic. And I think you're right. And look, I raised my hand. Look, I sold to federal government for quite a few years, been doing this a long time, kind of set in my ways, and by the way, unfortunately, that's when we get a little bit complacent as well. Yeah. So, I definitely think that the commercial market keeps people on their toes. And I love that. There's
also, and I've just really started experiencing this, you keep using the word seasoned. Sometimes I just feel old. But relating to, there's a generational difference. And so that's been very eye-opening for me. And, some of these folks, I'm like, you're how old? What do you mean you can't drink? So it's a very different, they perceive you differently and you perceive them differently. And I try not to let that get in the way. Yeah,
that's really good. Actually, that would be a good topic for another one of these conversations. So, Matt, I want to thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation. And folks, to those of you out there, my goodness, I think we've had as many comments on this thread as just about any I've done. Thank you so much for those of you who chimed in during the conversation. Matt, any closing thoughts from you, sir?
Other than thank you for the opportunity. Anybody who knows me knows I like to talk, so I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody that showed up. I love the questions and the responses.
Yeah, fabulous. And Matt, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and be a guest again. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, you can always follow the hashtag Tech Sales Advice. And if you want to learn a little bit more about my organization, go to techsalesadvisors.com. To Chris and Wayne and Jason and all the David, all the other folks that chimed in, thank you so much. And if you caught the recording and stuck around to the end, thanks so much for joining. Matt, hang around backstage just for a minute. I'm going to give you a parting gift. To everybody else, have a good week, and we'll see you next week on Tech Sales Advice.
Bye,
Bye all.